in the recording right away. If you have a question, you can always post it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. All right. So last week we also mentioned that Prince2 is one of the best methodology or framework for implementing projects globally. And it is not limited to IT projects. It is used for projects that relate to building projects, any form of projects. You can use Prince2 knowledge for it. Then we mentioned that Prince2 Agile, that Agile itself can be used either as a project methodology. It can also be used as BAU, which is business as usual. However, the Prince2 Agile that we are talking about is the use of Agile together with Prince2 for project management and not limited to IT projects only. The Prince2 Agile cut across IT and non-IT projects. So the overall Prince2 process model does not really change at the higher level, as we can see from here. From this diagram shows us how Agile needs to be incorporated into the 7 processes. According to Prince2, you have 7 processes. What are those processes? Those processes are SU. SU is starting a process, starting a project, starting up. DP is directing a project. IP is initiating a project. SB is the is talking about boundary for stage boundary. MP is managing products. CS here is talking about when you have a stage, how do you continue to manage the stage? So we'll look at all these processes and how these processes, in one way or the other, are still relevant in Agile or with Agile. So there are a variety of Agile approach, and only one release can take place per stage. If you look at the second side, you will see that for Prince2 itself, you have project direction, project management, and project delivery. For the Agile, you have this management stage. The management stage is a stage where the project is being managed. And then you have releases. When you talk about release are done in batches, and each batch is called a sprint. What we call stages in Prince2 is called a sprint. This SB is called stage boundary. Stage boundary. This stage boundary is like a complete sprint when you talk about agile. Another word for sprint is iteration and iteration. So we will look at how these 7 processes integrate or how agile is incorporated into the process. The amount of agile that is appropriate to each process varies. The amount of agile that you apply to each of the 7 processes varies. So we'll look at the 7 processes and we'll also look at how you apply agile for them. But what we need to know as far as this page is concerned is to remember that what we call a stage boundary is like the a release point, which is also referred to as a completion of a sprint. This release point, which is making available a product to the users to use, that is similar to stage boundary. And this end of a particular release is also called a sprint. All right, so typical agile projects process. Agile projects are projects that are broken down into iterations. Instead of using the word iterations, you can use the word sprints. So what you see here, which are called sprints, are the breakdown of delivery, the breakdown of different stage of delivery. The delivery stage here is what we call potentially shippable products. That means a product you can make available to customers. Even if that product does not have all the required feature, it can still or it could still be used. In agile projects, you start with vision and product backlog. The vision is the idea you have for the end product of the project. What is the idea? For example, minimum viable product. Exactly. Yes, that's what it means. It means it's a minimum viable product. But remember, there could be different sprints. So usually the first one is the one that we can best refer to as minimum viable products. But again, all other releases does not have to be, you don't have to complete the whole, you know, futures at once. So when we talk about vision, vision is like what is the end point, the final. For example, somebody wants to build a 20 high rise. 20 high rise building can be completed in 5 years. You understand? So the vision is to have a 20 high rise building. Then the product backlog, those are what are all the features that the building should have. Now, how do we relate this to Agile? In Agile, you have to envision your product at a stage called starting up a project. That is the Prince2 process, starting up a project. That's what they call it in Prince2. Another aspect or process in Prince2 is called initiating a project. So both starting a project and initiating a project is the same thing that is done under the vision and the product backlog, where all the features are all itemized. Now, the initiating a project, that also includes that you will prioritize what you have as your planned activity. Prioritize it. Okay? Then you begin to pick from the product backlog what you can achieve within a short time. When you pick what you can achieve, you also call that a sprint. For example, we want to build 20 high-rise and we now divided the work into monthly, what you can achieve on a monthly basis. So we can say for the first month, which is now the sprint, first sprint, what do we want to achieve? We want to do the foundation. And you know that foundation for high rise must be what? For a high rise building must be very deep. You have to dig down to provide a solid base for the 20 floors. So what are the activities you are going to do? How many, how deep will you dig? All those things are the activities you put in a sprint backlog. The potentially shippable product here is going to be the foundation, complete foundation for the 20-story building. The backlog, that's the sprint backlog, are items, list of what you want to achieve. And that is related to a process which is called controlling a stage. Controlling a stage. So in Prince 2, there are 6 processes or 7. So these are the processes: starting up a project, which is SU; IP, initiating a project. Initiating a project is getting an approver to start the project, to pick up the activities. Then CS is controlling a project. The PB is product backlog. The RB here is release backlog. So product backlog is the list of all the activities you want to do to achieve the vision. All the things you want to do for 3 years building plan you have, or you want to build a website, e-commerce website that will have artificial intelligence, machine learning, all the nice things to have, their product backlog. Then you break it down to what you can achieve, and that is the sprint backlog. Sprints is supposed to be achieved within 2 to 4 weeks. That is ideal state or situation. The plan is always break down to what you can achieve in 2 to 4 weeks as much as possible. In some special case, you can say, okay, you are doing it for a quarter, a 3 months, but it's better to still break down the 3 months into what you can achieve in 2 to 4 weeks. Then you talk about the PB, which is the product backlog. Product backlog is for each sprint. This one here, CS, controlling a sprint, controlling a stage here. Like I told you before, a stage is like a sprint. So completing a particular sprint is controlling a stage. Then when you complete a particular sprint, like you finish the foundation, you go to the next thing you have to do. The next thing you have to do, you have to pick it from where? From the product backlog. You pick it from product backlog. And then you also do that over another 2 to 4 weeks. When you complete that, maybe you are laying block up onto lintel. That can be your next sprint for 2 to 4 weeks. When you complete that, you go back to the backlog and pick another thing based on priority and take that through another sprint also. Okay? So a sprint is regarded as a stage in Prince 2. That's how they relate. Now, there is something called release and sprints. What is release? Release backlog, release means making it available for use, making a particular product or service available for use. From your product backlog, you can create another backlog. That is, create another heading called release backlog. What are the things that must be released? For example, it is a 20-story building, but they want you within 3 months to finish up the ground floor or the first 2 floor so that the company can start using the first 2 floor while you continue building on top, you know, or they want to use the ground floor for maybe as a warehouse. They just want to start making use of it. So they want you to release. So you prioritize what are those things you can release. And those release too will follow a backlog. I mean, follow a sprint where you decide how long will it take you to release. Remember, when you do, for example, first floor and you decking it and you start other work, for you to make the ground floor available for use, that is for you to release it, for them to start using it, you may have to do some interior work, okay? And that is where the release sprints or backlog sprint comes in. So you have both the product backlog. So from product backlog and from release backlog, you can be picking what you will do at different stages. That is when you compare releases and sprints or sprints only. Another way to look at the difference between these two is when you say sprints only, it's like we have finished the ground floor, tick. Then you start the first floor. Then release is we have finished the ground floor, in terms of the carcass. Release is do more than the carcass. Plaster the inside and the outside of the ground floor, or plaster the inside alone. Okay, put some fittings there so that it could be used for warehouse or whatever purpose. That is like release as you do your sprints. Okay, any question on this? Okay, when you have a project, let us look at housing project, for example. You want to build a three-story building, and then you want to use Agile for it. When you want to use Prince2 Agile, it means that it is not until the complete building is until it's not until the building is completed before you start making use of the building. For example, if you're not even going to live there, you probably can be using it to store something. Now, when you talk about ordinary sprints will be we have finished the first floor. That means we have decking the first floor. We have, done the whole block work, and that may be accepted. Why is it acceptable? It's acceptable because you do not need to make use of it, but you just want to make sure that they complete the ground floor as far as block is concerned and the decking. Then when we now talk about release, release is like I want to use that ground floor. So it means that it is not only carcass that will be done. There will be plastering of the inside. There will be windows fittings being put there. Okay. There will be security if you need to have security, you know, round that ground floor to protect the ground floor from people having access to it. That is release. Release is making a product or a service available for use. Did you get that? So make it available for use is release. A sprint itself, without looking at release, a sprint can deliver ground floor for you, which means you get when you get to the site, okay, the building site, you saw that okay, ground floor, you started to lay the block on the first floor. That means the ground floor is completed. Do you understand? It is completed, but it is not yet what you can use. Okay? Because you did not ask them to release it for you to use. So there are people that build, and as they complete each floor, they make use of it. Some people will not make use of it until they complete everything. All right, so let's go to the next one. Okay, so we said there are 7 processes. First one is starting up a project and initiating a project. The reason why we are putting these two together is because we are talking about Prince2 Agile. And in Prince2 Agile, both starting up a project and initiating a project is what we can relate to Agile in terms of product backlog. Product backlog. What are the product backlog? Or sometimes they call it epic. These are two distinct processes. Starting up a project is a process in Prince2. Initiating a project is a process. As I said before, we put them together because as far as Agile is concerned, the two of them are done together. When what you may find under the starting of a project is one, upfront work, where you calculate how much it will cost to do a project. You look at the vision, the you look at your discovery, and this is a zero sprint. Zero sprint means that at this point, nothing has been started. You have not started, the workers have not moved to sites at starting up a project. You are still finalizing what are the stages you are going to have, what are the futures. The customer is still prioritizing. That is what the starting up a project and initiating a project is all about. You're identifying what are the resources you need, who are the people that will carry out the work. That's what that implies. Okay. What do we do under this? Under this, you assess the level of uncertainty. That is, you identify what are the outcomes and benefits rather than the solution. That is the way of thinking which allow for agility. You are focused on the outcome. What are the outcome we want to achieve? And for you to identify your outcome and the benefit, you need to assess the level of uncertainty. And that is also where we use priority or prioritization. As I earlier mentioned, you have to use Moscow to prioritize your products backlog. You just don't put all of the futures together, all of the things that you want to do. You must have a priority, a degree of uncertainty. Which one are you likely not to do? So you arrange them. You define things in the right way. You set up the project in appropriate manner. You give people different roles. That's what you do under starting up a project, initiating a project. Who are the people that will play a role of maybe electrical fittings, who will do the mechanical work, the plumbing work? All of those things are done under starting up a project and initiating a project. It's like a project plan, a detailed project plan. That's what you do under starting up a project and initiating a project. Starting up a project and initiating a project, how do you do it? It is always best to collaborate with others. That means call people together in a workshop. Let there be a workshop. Let it, let there be more informal control and communication. What do you mean by informal control and communication? Let people who are part of the project or who will be part of the project, let them contribute ideas. Let people contribute idea and make them to relax, to contribute the idea in an informal way. No idea is to be considered stupid ideas. All ideas, you put them together and then you can prioritize. So you can use a workshop to achieve starting up a project and initiating a project. All right, so we mentioned that under this starting up a project, you use sniffing to assess the level of uncertainty. What is sniffing? Sniffing is used as a framework, and the creator of sniffing is the name is called Dave Snowden. Sniffing is a decision-making framework. It helps you to determine the level of complexity of the project. It helps you to know how complex a project might be. That is what sniffing does for you. It helps you to know the level of complexity of a project. So it's important for you as much as possible to refer to this sniffing framework to make decision. It is not mandated by Prince2 Agile. However, a lot of people have used this approach and it has worked for them. So while using this approach, you can be innovative about it. And the reason of including this framework is that many areas of Agile operate in a very volatile and disruptive situation. Agile can be very volatile, can be very destructive. And to ensure you have the right decision made, you can use the sniffing approach. So this approach describes relationship between cause and effect. It helps you to know how complex an environment is. Then let's look at what it is in terms of the framework. This sniffing framework is made up of 5 domains. The first domain you can look at is complicated, complex, chaotic, obvious, and the fifth one is disorder. So you can use the sniffing framework to assess the output, the outcome, as well as the benefits. In a project environment, you can be working with people in different time zone. And if you are working with people you have never worked with before in different time zone, you know that the clock will not be the same. So when you are looking at complicated, what does it mean when we talk about complicated? Complicated means you have assessed your project and the project's plan. That is what you plan to do, the things that you are required to do, classify them. Which of these tasks is complicated? Which one is obvious? Which one is complex? Which one is chaotic? When you use a sniffing framework, you collaboratively assess it and avoid people's natural tendencies. So you can assess the project environment. For example, the people you want to work with. A project manager many a times will be external to the organization. Even when you are internally, you are an internal staff working for an organization as a project manager, you'll be doing different projects. That means you'll be dealing with different set of people. The people you work with when you are doing a particular project last year may not be the same type of people you are going to work with. Maybe you work with a particular department in the first quarter, then the next quarter you're working in that department. So you need to identify the environment. You need to assess the environment where you are working. Is it a complex environment? Is it a chaotic environment? When you say complex, it means you have enabling constraint. The things they do there are loosely coupled, and this complex means the practice is not yet fully enthroned. The practice is not fully used. It's still emerging. That means most of the project is not fully understood by everybody in the organization. What is the deliverable is not fully understood. When you talk about obvious, obvious means you have a tight constraint. You can not but follow all the requirement because the organization already have best practice. No degree of freedom. You cannot easily vary anything without approval. Then chaotic. Chaotic is something that lack constraints, is decoupled. It is more of you acting based on what you sense and you respond. There is no constraint, not too much constraint. That is chaotic. Then you talk about complicated. Complicated is where there are a lot of governing constraints, such as regulators. The legal department will tell you you can't do this, IT security will say, no, you can't do this on this project, and that thing will come up with their own constraint. That's a complicated approach. And then you have the fifth one, which is disorder. Disorder is a combination of everything. It's a disorder environment. So the environment in which you are carrying out a project matters, and you can always, based on the environment, vary how you react and relate with people, how you react and relate with the people you are working with. Typically, projects will exist in complicated or complex domain. If the work exists in an obvious domain, many a times it will be handled as business as usual. It will not be a project. If the work you are doing is in chaotic domain, it will probably be unsuitable for existing process. That is, if the environment is chaotic, that is already showing you that the probability of a success of the project is very low. That is in chaotic. So, because it means there is no constraints. For example, you are doing a project and the people you are working with on the project, maybe they give you 5 people to work with you, and 3 of them decide to go on leave. What do you think will happen to the project time? Hello? Yeah, what will happen to the project timeline if you have 5 people you are working with from the customer side and 3 of them decide to go on leave for 1 month and the project is 1 month? Is that not a chaotic? That means there's no constraints. The people can just wake up and say, today, I'm not showing up for 1 week. I'm taking casual leave 1 week. All the tasks you have asked them to do, who is going to do it? That's a chaotic environment. Environment, like some people call it in some countries, civil servants behave that way, where no one can ask them to stay, complete 1 month for this project, no holiday, no leave. And the advice is to know that if you are going to be in such project will not be suitable for Agile and Prince2 because you can hardly meet your deadline. Okay, Agile and Prince2. All the 7 teams need to be incorporated in Agile. That is important. We need to reemphasize that nothing in Prince2 is removed when we are doing Agile. Some teams are more prominent than others when combining Prince2 with Agile. We have talked about Agile and Prince2 processes. The next thing we are talking about now is Agile and Prince2 teams. Agile has processes, 7 processes. We mentioned some of them. Starting up a project is a process. Initiating a project is a process. Okay. Stage boundary is a project. Controlling a stage is a project. Project closure is also a process. So there are 7 processes, and we have seen how they align with Agile. Now, I want to talk about the teams. There are 7 teams as well, and this team must be incorporated. And it's worthy of note that not nothing should be removed in terms of the Prince2 teams. You just need to incorporate them. Number one, out of the 7 teams that we have in Prince2 is called business case. What is a business case? Generally, a business case is like a document that justify why a project should be carried out. So, what is the view of Agile when it comes to business case? It may not exist in some Agile environments. as there may be a focus on value assigned to futures instead of a product. It may be created at the beginning of a piece of work as part of a sprint zero. So business case could be part of sprint zero. That is, you must, as at the time you are initiating a project, when you are starting up a project, you could you are supposed to have a business case, a justification. Why are we doing the project? What is the benefit? What do we lose if we don't do the project? So business case is a document, and there are different templates available for you to use to do the project. Use create to create a business case. Remember, when we talk about agile, there are different agile way of work or different implementation method. One of it is Scrum. Scrum do not have a business case. That is when you use Scrum framework. That's why we say some agile environment like Scrum agile environment does not use business case. And that is one of the famous framework or agile environment you find. Scrum. They don't use business case. But that does not mean business case is completely irrelevant. It might have been used at a stage before the sprint commences. Okay, what is the guidance for using the business case? Business case should be built around the early benefits. Like I mentioned, business case is about justification. What is the benefit that the project can deliver? How does it benefit the business? The minimum viable product need to be stated in the business case. Also, best case, worst case, expected case should be part of the business case. What the meaning of best case? Best case means if the project is executed the way we plan, if all the resources are available, this is the best product we can get. This is the future we can get, the best case. The worst case is if we did not do the project, this is what will happen to the company. Expected case is if we do, for example, like 50%, what do we expect to get? What are the futures that are delivered? What is the best future that can be delivered? What is the worst and what is the expected one? Where there is a lot of uncertainty, of course, this will affect a lot of things. Uncertainty may also take very little time. So, under the business case, we provide a justification. We follow a template. Every organization have a template, and the template is what needs to be followed to determine how much is being delivered, not how late or how early. How much are you going to deliver within this project? So business case gives like a justification. And like I said again, it could be done before the sprint starts, sprint zero, at the time you are initiating the project. Okay, how do we define value? Value in terms of outcome, what the business requires is value. Value can be subjective. That means value is not the same thing to every person. For example, it is possible to value one future as a 10, and you can also value another future as 5. That's what it means when you talk about value. Value can be assessed in many ways. You can assess value in terms of revenue, in terms of reducing costs, in terms of customer service. Not all projects are done because organizations want to increase their revenue. Some projects are done because organization wants to reduce costs. Some projects are not done because of either reduction of cost or increasing revenue. They are just done to get customer satisfied. So not all projects have the same value. And it's also very important to know what the value is. And it is good to differentiate between output, outcome, and the benefits. Output, for example, is the delivery of an activity, tangible delivery of an activity. Outcome is what can be done with the activity. And benefit is how the outcome, that is what the customer is able to do with the product or service, how it has added to them in terms of reducing their cost, revenue increase, or customer satisfaction. This output, I mean outcome and benefit, we need to measure it. Business case should be flexible to maximize profits. I mean benefits. Focusing on benefits can help us through collaborating with people, discussing with people, getting input from others. It helps us to focus on benefits. We can know what, for example, if you want to implement a project, let us say you want to implement a project for HR department, you need to collaborate. You need to engage the people in HR to know what are they doing now, what do they expect as a value from the projects. Let us take, for example, let's say before now, the organization implement, I mean, they apply, people apply for leave by writing letter. You can decide to say, okay, we want to change that. Now you have to apply through a portal. You need to collaborate with people and ask them, this portal we want to build, what are the things you expect? Do you want to use it for applying for your leave allowance through the portal? Do you want to be able to, you know, check the level of approval using the portal? All those things come through collaboration. So a business case should show the outcome and benefit that can be measured, not just something that exists, but there's no way to measure it. Okay, requirements and user stories. When it comes to Agile, we always talk about requirements and user stories. What is a user story? A user story is simply talking about what a user is expecting and how a user expects to use the project's products or the project's deliverable. That is a user story. What a product should do and how well it does the job is what forms user story. It can also be part of the product description and can also be a requirement. Definition should be at the right level and decomposed at the right time, allowing them to evolve. What that means is that you need to define your user story very well. User story should be well defined, prioritized. There are many user stories. Like, for example, if you engage with people, like we mentioned, collaborate. If you talk to somebody in HR who is doing payroll, the person may tell you, this is how I do my job, and this project, this is how I expect the project to help me do my job. When you talk to somebody else, it gives you another story. All those user story, you put them together and you prioritize them. Sometimes you may need to help them refine the user story. What is a typical example of a user story? As I mentioned before, you can guide the users in creating the user story. User stories is a starting point, and these are deliberately not fully defined. So the conversation has to take place. You need to get requirements through user stories. How do we create a user story? These are the keywords as a the role of the user. For example, as a HR manager, I want to, what is the function you want to do? I want to manage all my staff leave. What is the benefit? So that I will know those who are on leave at a point in time. I will know those who have not gone on leave throughout the year without using, for example, a folder, without calling for a file, without having to go and look for a file. I want to be able to do that. That is a user story. So a user story follow this format as a role, not as the user. It is the role the user is playing. We are going to have the story created for, because that role might be occupied by someone else. So you don't attach a user story just to a user. It is to the role that they are doing, they are performing. If, for example, somebody is performing the role of a finance manager, the user story that he has given to you, if the person leave the role tomorrow and become CFO, Chief Financial Officer, the new person who comes to that role, the same user story will apply to the person, because user story is aligned to roles, functions, and benefits. So the statements of the requirements of any user should be aligned to this user story. Additional information you can request will be what is the acceptance criteria, meaning all of these function and all of the benefits. What is the acceptance? More about the benefits. Which of these benefits is a must? Which one is it that if we do not meet that benefit, you will not accept? So that's the acceptance criteria. Sometimes they call it DOD, definition of done. Then effort involved. Effort involved could also be when you get the requirement, you can specify how long it will take to achieve this. Let us take, for example, someone says, yeah, yes, exactly. It will amount to definition of done because you have met the acceptance criteria. And the acceptance criteria, you have to derive it from the benefits. Not all the benefit may be achieved. So you have to say this, which one are you prioritizing over the other? Which one is it that once we achieve it, you are okay? Then efforts involved is you have to put a you have to put your time, how long it will take you to achieve it. For example, you have a user story that says, as a customer service employee, okay, of a company, I want to, that is my function. I want to be able to send birthday greeting to all our customers so that the customers can know that we care about them. I also want to send them gift item. I want to send them gift item. I want to send them birthday wishes. The next question will be, How long will it take to create that future, to build it into the software so that the software can remind you? Again, reminder can be different ways. Reminder via email or email and SMS. Those are criteria, acceptance criteria. If I remind you by email, are you okay? Or you must get SMS. Effort involved. How long will it take to create such future? How long will it take to achieve the user story? Okay? And then you can put a value to it in terms of like a cost. What is like costing in terms of man hour? Okay? This is like how much it costs to achieve it. The user story is always a starting point, and many a times it can be refined. That's why we say it is not fully defined. It can always be refined. But what you need to know is this is the way to specify user story. Roles, function, and benefits. And that's the same for all agile. Okay. All right. So see examples here again. User stories. Take it takes skill to learn how to create a good user story, and you have to invest a lot. So is the definition of ready. Invest is used by many as a way to create user story. For example, look at this. How do you know a good user story? This person, a stock controller, that is the what? The function, not the name of a person. So you start by saying as a stock function, that is who is the person in terms of the role. I want to, what do you want to achieve? The function. Know if my stock level is very low. Why do you want to know? So that that is the benefit. Why? So that I don't run out and fail to fulfill a customer order. What is the value does this bring to the business? 8. What is the effort? How many hours? Effort can be in terms of days or hours. 2 days. What is the definition in terms of value? Okay, so you can talk about the PTO for quality criteria. As a user, story of limited usefulness. A user story can be of a limited usefulness. One, as a store manager, I want to manage a store so that the store is managed effectively. Look at what you have below and what you have up. Which one of them do you think is better? The one up or the one below? Which one? The one up? Why? Because the one up talks about what you actually want. You want to know the stock level. Managing a store involves exactly. Managing a store involves a lot of things. Then the exactly store is effectively managed. So that store is effectively managed. That is also very wide. So you need to help users refine their requirements. Do you understand? The user can tell you this is what we want. You have to look at it. Does it make a good user story? If it does not, what do? You help them to refine it. How do you help them to refine it? You use this idea of who, that is the function they are performing, what and why they want it, and you narrow it down to something that can be measured. Exactly, something that can be measured. What you want to do and why you need it. Now, sometimes a user story may be too lengthy. Like in the case of this now, this can just be what a user will tell you. This is just what we want to do. You have to break it down into user stories. So, epic, a user can tell you a user story, but by the time you look at it yourself, you know that this one cannot be achieved within, for example, 2 to 4 weeks. So, you have to break it down. into multiple stories. There are some that are technical story. You can use that for non-functional requirements. For example, story around performance or speed. But for a story that relates to functional requirements, what function you expect it to perform, you have to break it down. And you break it down by also including the efforts and the business value. Let there be a value rating that you get from the business. Okay, requirements priority. How do you prioritize requirements? Remember, what do we use? Moscow. Every time we talk about Moscow. Okay, must have, should have, would, yeah, would not have for now. So you have to use this to prioritize. That is one way. Another way to prioritize is to use ordering, which is saying I which one is the first one you want, which one is the second, which one is the third. But many people don't know how to arrange in order. It may be better to just help them by using Moscow. Because if the project did not go on well, even though the customer is the one that did not give you the right ordering, but the customer can tell you that he did not understand it well. That is why you can use Moscow to support, not just say, write it for me in the order in which you want it done. You can help the customer to understand what the order means. For example, the first three, those are the must have. Is that? Yes, no. That is what help a lot. Moscow and ordering. What is the meaning of must have? Before you can identify that something is a must have, what should you do? You need to really ask the question, is it really a must have? How do you know it's a must have? Can it work without it? Is it worth delivering without it? Look at this pen, for example. What do you think is a must have in a pen? Is the ink refill? If there is no ink in the pen and the pen is very, it looks so, it's very fine. Do you think it is a gold pen, but the pen does not have ink? Of what value is the gold, so to say, for the purpose of writing? It does not have a value. So ink refill is a must have in the case of this. Okay? Can it be decomposed? Meaning, can you break it down? The must have. Can you break it down? Then ordering is appropriate. You must, when you break down, you must order it appropriately. You must identify where there are dependencies. I'm sure you know, or you must have used a pen before without the casing, without this barrel. Have you used a pen like that before to write? Mr. Lushola? Mr. Lushola, have you used a pen before that does not have a barrel? That doesn't have the plastic case. Exactly. So everyone has used. Did it write or did not write? It did. So the case is not a must have, it's a should have. That's what they are saying. Now, example of wouldn't have is company logo. There are so many companies that give people pen as a gift, or they include pen as part of the gift and they don't put their logo because it is a wouldn't have for now. Maybe because they are not doing it in bulk. So the cost of printing logo will be expensive if it's not volume. Then look at this one, cap. The cap, the top, what is to cover the pen? How many times do you use a pen without covering it? Is a could have. If the top is provided, then the hole in the top is to avoid shocking. So if it's to avoid choking, then it must be a must have. So you must know why. Do we really need it? Is it a could have or must have. There are some pen that if you don't cover it, what happen? If you don't cover some pen, exactly. So if the ink will spill off, then the cover becomes a what? A must have, because this cover goes together with the ink refill itself. So it's always good to order appropriately the requirements. Okay? Using prioritization, we must be able to prioritize. Very important. Prince 2 also refers to quality criteria, whereas the Agile calls it acceptance criteria. So in Prince 2, what we call quality criteria, in Agile it is called acceptance criteria. Prince 2 calls it quality criteria, Agile calls it acceptance criteria. It's still the same thing. So you prioritize because you want to know what are the functional requirements, what are the things that are required for this product or project to be successful. Then you must also review from time to time. You must sit down with people to look at which of these do we still need, because sometimes priority changes, and that's why you have to do review from time to time. Sometimes there may be need to change the priority. So when you manage a project in Agile, change is something you must be ready to handle dynamically. Change. What is the general view of Agile when it comes to change? Agile embraces change. Agile responds to change and it welcomes change. Changes to detail is typically viewed as positive. Change to baseline may not be. What that means is that there are some things that cannot change, which are the baseline, the basic. For example, if you look at the must have, those ones are likely not to change. But if you look at things like should have, could have, looking at the example of the pen, by the time you create a product, which is the ink refill, you might accept a change to the barrel. This barrel, maybe it is supposed to be transparent, and the company says, no, we don't want transparent again. Those changes are changes to futures you can accept. Maybe this cap is supposed to be another design that they are selecting. Those are changes you can take. Okay? So changes to detail is typically viewed as positive. Changes to baseline is what may not be considered as very positive or as something that will add value. The baseline is being referred to means an appropriate level of detail which you must define at the right time. Very important. So what can guide changes? Prince 2 could be said to be more cautious. That is, you just don't change without considering the fact that the changes can affect the quality, it can affect the time to deliver. Too much detail too early is not good, but equally too little detail at the beginning is also not good. So there should be a blend with agile control significant change. It is important that you use baseline to know your correct level of detail. For example, when someone is doing a project and the project is a three-story building, if that is what you are told at the beginning, and after you have laid the foundation, you are now told to make it a 10-story building, Is that going to work, Mr. Lushola? It won't. Why? Because the baseline cannot sustain it. It's for three. It can't work. That can they reinforce the foundation? Well, see, that is where um, it is possible. And I'll give you an instance where they do that. There are sometimes that you will see a building, there will be pillars that are strategically located, and all the other floors will be resting on that pillar. That means you are creating indirectly another foundation around the one you have before. Do you understand? That's the only way. You have to still go back to the foundation. You have to do another foundation around the one you have so you can hold the other seven floors. So that is still going to affect the baseline. So it's good to have sufficient knowledge, information at the beginning. Not too much, but sufficient so that it will help your planning. Because if the baseline is not good, then it will affect what you build on it. So starting up a project, initiating a project can create a correct environment for this. That is what should be done at the time of starting up a project and initiating a project. Questions should be asked. Okay, this is a three-story building plan. Is there a possibility of making it five? Is there a possibility of making it 10, 8? All those questions should be asked so that even if the person says, well, we might look at it in the next 5 years, then you will make sure that the foundation is done such that there is room to add up to create another foundation by the side that will not affect the building. Okay, change in terms of guidance is also hard to embrace change when requirements are written in black and white. Perhaps the old requirement should be the scope, but you need to use a useful option to define your requirements in a more flexible way so that your quality criteria can be used to enable flexing. There's something called flexing. What is flexing? Remember when we started, we mentioned flexing. Flexing is allowing for a change, okay? That is being flexible. The word flexing is coming from the word flexible. So what is the guidance? How should you handle change in projects? One, your requirements should be defined. You need to do a good risk management to limit the impact of change. You need to have a good configuration management. What is the configuration management? You need to have a place where you keep record of all the different components that are used, all the items, component being used. Changes should be allowed. However, there should be a defined tolerance. What is a tolerance? How far can you change? As in, are you accepting change up to 20% or 10% variation? That is what we mean by tolerance. Because if there's no tolerance, then the change may completely consume the whole budget before you even reach half of the project implementation. Okay, Agile also focuses strongly on feedback. Prince2 Agile also focus on feedback, and you can get feedback by using things like lean startup. When you're talking about a feedback is you show people what you have done. That is the people that needs to know and can provide feedback. Show them what you have done and let them give you their own thoughts. Let them express their thoughts. Oh, it's good, it could be better, and all that. There are many forms of feedback loop. Feedback loop. What's a feedback loop? A feedback loop is a way by which you get a feedback at the time you have completed, for example, ground floor. The feedback you get, you use it in completing the first floor. When you complete the first floor, you get another feedback. The feedback will also be used in the next iteration or the next sprint. So feedback loop is taking feedback and using it in the next phase of work. So there are many forms of this feedback. There's what they call OODA, which is you observe, orient, orientate, decide, and act. There's also called plan, do, check, and act, PDCA. Plan, do, study, and act. And then for lean, they use build, measure, and learn. Build, as you build, you do measurements. Based on your measurements, you learn what you can improve as you do the next iteration, which is the next build. What lesson do you need to use? These are different forms of feedback loop that can be used. Plan, do, check, and act. Observe, orientate yourself based on what you observe, take a decision, and act on your decision. Take action. Very important. Organization. Organization is another aspect, which is another theme that we'll talk about. What is the general view of Agile in terms of organization? Organization is another theme that we have in Prince 2. We've talked about business case. Another one is organization. How should you organize your team? How should you organize the people that will work and deliver the projects? As far as Agile is concerned, the organization should be organization that should be self-organized. Self-organized means people, to a large extent, have a say in who they work with. And there are two roles that we can use. We can use the role of a scrum master and product owner. In Agile, we don't talk about project manager. We don't talk about team manager role. The two common roles you hear is what? Scrum master, product owner. So when you complete a training like this and you are looking for a job, you should not only look for a job of a project manager, you should also try your hand to do the job of a scrum master or product owner. Also, there are dedicated training anyway for this one. These are advanced training you can also take on top of this training you are taking. So in well, there are different nomenclatures. So let me give you the best answer, sir. The best answer is you should have different curriculum vitae, have different CVs, different resume. It is based on what the job description is. If the job description is specifying they need a scrum master, don't put scrum master stroke agile. Just apply for scrum master, then make sure your CV reflect those skills that align with the job description. If another job offer says project manager, don't call yourself a scrum master because in that case they will say no, 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 no. They don't want you. They want a project manager. So you have to have another CV that is project manager. So no, you don't. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. Yes. So again, there are some websites in the UK which I've also used before that when you put your CV there, it will do a scan and it will rate your CV and tell you These are the keywords missing. So what I would say is you can put, if it is not a specific job, then you have to put project manager, scrum master, product owner, put all of them. However, yes, that is if you are putting it, if you are uploading it for general, but you should have those ones that are specific to job that you are applying for. Always good to rewrite your CV. Sometimes you can have 10 different versions of your CV. It all depends on the job that you're applying for. All right. So in Agile, if it's an Agile project, those are the two common roles. Those ones that we used to know before, like project manager, business analyst, requirement engineer, team manager, they are less prominent. They may exist, they may not exist. Okay, in simple terms, Prince2 roles can be added to agile delivery roles. That's just it. In Prince2, the delivery roles of Prince2 is what aligns to agile roles. In Prince2, you have the project manager role. In agile, as we have said, what we have is what? Scrum master or product owner. In some organization, they even stop scrum master and they just use only product owner because they believe that a product owner can do the job of a scrum master or a scrum master. Okay, so it all depends on the nature of the work. Roles need to be aligned. Okay, it all depends on the size of the work. If it is a large work, the number of teams that are involved will be multiple teams, and in that case, you need to be careful. And that is why in some large projects, they also have what they call Scrum of Scrum, not just Scrum alone. Scrum of Scrum. That means you have a Scrum Master reporting to another Scrum Master or Senior Scrum Master role. It all depends on the nature of work. Okay, a complicated area to integrate an agile delivery team into Prince2, you can have a complicated area where it may be difficult to align them. In that case, what is the recommendation for you? Okay, for example, if a Scrum team is working very effectively, it could be damaging to a team manager role. So in Agile, we have what they call a team manager role. In Scrum, you need to map the team manager role to the role of a Scrum Master instead of duplicating the roles. Common Agile guidance also refer to a single product owner. However, you can have a product owner and a project manager, or a product owner and a scrum master. Sometimes you just work with one of them. The common agile guidance does not have a project manager role. That is the truth. The common agile guidance, they don't have project manager role. However, Prince2 believe that this role is still mandatory on a project. But most projects that are agile, they only use pro- product owner, scrum master. So the advice is you need to take up another training that can be specific to scrum master, knowing fully well that common agile does not have project manager role. And again, anywhere they are looking for project manager, Sometimes when a scrum master apply, they will not take the person because they will know that the person does not have the foundation or fundamental knowledge of project management. That means the person can only work in agile environment. It cannot be part of the waterfall implementation approach. Okay, so a project manager relates to delivery team in many ways. The delivery team are the people that create the products. Delivery team, for example, in case of building a house, those who are the builders, they are the delivery team. The project manager is not a builder, is overseeing the project. So the delivery team roles should be left as they are. That is the recommendation of Prince2 Agile. The delivery team roles should identify a single point of contact for project manager. That is where you have many people who are doing the same job, creating the product, delivering the product. The project manager cannot be talking to everybody. There should be a contact person that project manager will talk to. And that person is usually called a team manager. Some people call them supervisor. Okay? And that is the way projects is being managed. However, in Agile, they simply talk about a product owner, they talk about Scrum Master, and then they talk about the development team. The development team are the ones delivering, and the development team is also expected, even in Agile, to have like somebody who is a lead engineer. The lead engineer relates with Scrum Master and the product owner. But it also depends on the size of the project. In some organization, the Scrum Master himself will be the lead engineer. That means he's actually taking part in the delivery of the project. But that should not be, because the job of a Scrum Master is not to carry out, is to follow a plan, to check who is following the plan, what is the next plan, what can hinder this project from taking place, not to, you know, get his hand dirty, not to be the one, for example, carrying the block, setting the block. No, that's not the job of a project owner or a Scrum Master. Okay, we'll take a break once we end this team. Organization, the delivery team, usually represented by some of or the following. The delivery team are those teams that carry out the work. The recommendation is that there should be someone to lead the team. Sometimes it can come from the customer, or there should be a representative of the customer among the people delivering the projects. You can also have a multi-skilled person. There must be somebody to assure the quality of the products, someone that can coach others, which include coaching them in agile. So that's why you hear somebody says agile coach. Agile coach is like a delivery team, somebody who is in the team and is responsible to coach other people on the best way to do the work or deliver the project in an agile way. Okay, structure. All roles need to be conversant with working in an agile way. Very important. Everyone that is taking part in a project that is managed by agile need to know how to work in agile way. And that is why we said there should be like a agile coach. If you have one team, then you need to have a project manager, and you can also delegate the job of a project manager to the team manager if you are using agile. Can you see this? Because in agile, project manager is not being used, then you can use team manager as well. Sometimes they don't call them team manager. In some project, they call them lead, team lead. or lead engineer if it has to do with software development. Okay? All right. So, what is the way in which project is being organized according to Prince2 Agile? You are supposed to have three people who are managing, who are directing, sorry, not managing, who are directing the project. And these people are people representing the customer. They are the one directing. And then you have the executive, the senior supplier, then you have the senior user. The senior user here represents those people who will take over. For example, if the project is for HR, then the HR people are the senior user. The IT people that are carrying out the activity can be the executive, that's the CIO. The senior supplier are the external consultant they may need, the external providers that may work with them. Needs to be managed by somebody called a senior supplier. So here, the customer representative can be the CSME or the SSME. That is like the subject matter experts from the customer side. The project manager role, as far as Prince2 Agile is concerned, is still very important. The project manager is the one to manage the team one by one, manage different team. But if you look at this side, you are talking more about delivery team. Then you can also have the team manager do the job of a project manager. And there must be the customer representative, where you have the supplier subject matter experts, the customer subject matter experts, expert two, expert one, and there should be somebody in charge of quality assurance. All of these can be the supplier representative. From the supplier side, you have this one. From the customer side, you have the customer subject matter experts. So all the roles needs to be conversant with working in the agile environment. Both the supplier, that is the partners you are working with, and your internal staff. Everyone must know how to work in agile environments. Okay, any question? Let's take our before we take our break. Any question?